Welcome to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. I am Halli Casser-Jayne. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show is always available online at hallicasserjayne.com. Now, let's get to it. This week on episode 346, it's Hooray for Hollywood. No one gives a party like Oscar. This year, February 24th, Oscar celebrates 91 years of film achievement. Who will win the Golden Statuette for Best Film? And the Oscar for Best Actress is the Best Director. Joining me to talk about Oscar and much more is Chicago Sun-Times film critic Richard Roeper and director, writer, producer, actor, and raconteur Charles Matthau, a voting member of the Academy Awards. And here we go. For more than 3 decades, Richard Roeper has been the leading film critic and a columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times. He rose to national prominence as the co-host of the popular series Ebert and Roeper, alongside Roger Ebert. His film reviews always insightful and entertaining. In celebration of the film industry's highest honor, the Academy Awards HDNET Movies rolls out the red carpet for its 3rd annual movie event, and the Oscar goes to, with Roeper returning to lend his movie industry and pop culture expertise to a slate of over 50 Oscar-winning films, airing nonstop from February 1st to the night of the 91st Academy Awards, February 24th. Let's talk with Richard Roeper. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Halli. How are you?
Who the hell knows? It's a Monday. How are you?
Doing okay. I feel the same way.
Yeah, right. I can't get it together no matter what I do today.
I'll let you know tomorrow how I am today.
That sounds like a plan, buddy. If we can get through all of what we're about to do. Anyway, so nice to have you here. I've been following you as long as you've been around. And you're one of my favorite critics because you have fun.
Well, you have great taste.
I do, darling. Don't I have the best taste in the whole wide world, everybody? I mean, it's really true. But listen, let's get serious just for a minute because a lot of things are going on in filmdom these days that I wanted to talk to you about. That's why I was so happy to book you here. I first want to start with this, but let's talk about film critique. Tell me, is it an art form? It's an opinion, an avocation? Is it the career of the power and the hungry? Tell me what you do for a living and why you do it.
That's a great question. The late, great Gene Siskel once told me that you need 2 things to be a film critic, a professional film critic. 1 is an opinion, and 2 is someone who will pay you for your opinion, and good luck with number 2. That's always the key. Everybody's a film critic, I think. Everybody who goes to movies in one way or another is a critic. What I try to bring to my job is, the experience I have of, seeing some 5,000 films over the last 25 years, more than that probably, and, having that knowledge of film going back even before that, and trying to put things into context for the audience. From my standpoint, the role of the film critic is to inform the audience, the potential audience, of what a film was about, why I think it worked, why I think it doesn't work, and then they can make their own informed decision. I don't review movies for other critics or really even for the industry. When I'm writing my reviews or broadcasting my reviews, I'm thinking about the audience member. Is this movie worth their hard-earned money and their very precious leisure time?
Good point. Let me ask you this, though. How did this happen? I mean, did you start out to do this, or did you start out in something else and you kind of fell into it? What?
Well, I started off as a journalism. In journalism, as a reporter, always knew that I wanted to write more about pop culture and entertainment, although I did cover other types of news when I first came up. And I was at the same newspaper as Roger Ebert, so I worked my way up through the ranks and eventually became kind of the second critic there. So when Roger would be at film festivals or other things, I would, sometimes fill in as a movie reviewer. I was writing pop culture columns. So it was kind of a gradual process to becoming a full-time film critic, which I think, honestly, it's not that I planned it that way, but I think it's a better route. I think if someone starts writing movie reviews when they're in college and does nothing other than review movies, that can be a kind of an isolated insulated world, and I think it's better to have a lot of experience covering other things and absorbing other parts of the world before writing specifically about film.
Was film always something that you loved?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I was, grew up in a family that loved movies, always went to the movies, started writing about film when I was in college. So I can't say I necessarily set out to be a film critic, and I would certainly advise young people to be cautious about that because there are so few full-time jobs doing it, but it was always a passion of mine.
So listen to what I'm going to tell you. Don't laugh, but this is true. Most film critics these days are boring. They really are. Full of themselves. They're injected into everything they do. Not you. You're fun. You're not only good at what you do, but you are fun. And I think I'm reviewing you now.
That's okay. I don't mind.
Halli the critic.
Everybody else.
To see how well you do with it, as long as I'm good, right? As long as I'm nice. But I think this is it. I think, a lot of people like film, and then there are those who kind of like film, and then there's those who, I'll go see a film because I heard it's a really great film or whatever. But I think your gift has been that you've been able to bring the joy back to viewing films. I think some of that's kind of missing these days, and we're going to talk a little bit about why, but I'll just throw out this. Films are getting very serious, darling. Dealing with very serious things, and a lot of fun has gone out of film. Talk to me.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you on that. And look, I think there's a lot of fine film criticism out there, but what I see, whether it's if I go over to Rotten Tomatoes and see what other critics are saying, or certainly on social media, is yes, there are a lot of critics who are almost looking for something controversial or something they can complain about in a movie. There's a lot of writing about how this movie should have done this and should have done that. They're criticizing a movie that was never made. There are critics who get very deeply passionate about casting decisions for movies and take it very seriously, and I don't really believe in all of that. I believe first of all, I'm a fan of movies. I want the movies I'm seeing to be good. I don't understand people who get into film criticism who don't like movies, and I do believe that in many cases that is true. Or they like a very specific kind of movie and don't like the mainstream stuff. To me, that's being a music critic and saying, well, I don't like Lady Gaga and I don't like Cardi B and I didn't really like the Beatles, but hey, I'm a music critic. Well, then why did you get into it in the first place? Right. Absolutely so agree with you on that. And I think it's a point well taken, because I think it also affects how we view what we see. And I think it's hurt the film industry about film. Most of us go to films to be entertained, right? Why else go? To get lost in another world, to feel. Remember that thing called feeling? To escape. Exactly.
Now, that's my opinion. What do you see as the role of film in our society?
Well, I think it can, obviously it can, film can transcend that and be about, very serious issues and bring up, important things, reflect things that are going on in society, and, elevate the discourse. But I do think, we always talk about this, it's show business, it's entertainment. And, when people say, the studios, they're just in this to make money. Yeah, that's right. That's how they were founded more than 100 years ago and continue. They are in it to make money, and if they don't make money, they're going to stop making movies. And you raise a great point, too, about, films being escapism. And I have to keep that in mind when I'm doing my reviews. When I'm writing my reviews, I'm not going to change my opinion, but if a film is a light romantic comedy or a silly bit of escapism and it succeeds as such, I'll say so. Because you're right. Most people just want to go to the movies to forget about everything else that's happening in this world of ours.
Absolutely true. So, but here's a question for you. Maybe you've pondered it, maybe you haven't. Does film create society? Does society reflected in film? Well, which came first, the apple or the chicken or the egg? I guess that's the one I was looking for. I told you it was Monday, Richard.
The orange chicken came first. There you go.
And we could go far with that, too, that orange word. Oh, my God, the orange word. Okay.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
I think it's obvious. It's a little bit of both. I think in most cases, film is reflecting society more than the other way around. Once in a while, a film will come out, like Do the Right Thing. That was maybe waking up a lot of people to things that were going on that weren't necessarily going on in their backyard, or they were just not paying attention to it. and things like that. And certainly, different parts of history have been enlightened by film and haven't had a spotlight shown on them. People said, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know about Oscar Schindler until I saw Spielberg's film. And I think that's great. But I think in most cases what we're looking at is, movies are reflecting what the filmmakers and the scriptwriters are going through in their own lives or seeing happening in the world.
So filmmaking today, is Hollywood producing films on par with or not with the films that were produced in the quote-unquote golden age of film? We have a new golden age, maybe, but I'm curious as to what, and then we'll talk about HDNet, but talk to me about this as we lead into that.
Well, if you look at what's coming out every Friday in the multiplexes in 5,000 theaters across the country, you're going to make, it's pretty easy to say, no, the films of the early 70s or back in the 30s and 40s were better. Although I always remind people, when you're seeing movies from the 30s and 40s and even from the 70s, you're seeing the best movies from that era. You're not seeing all of the movies that came out then. There were a lot of B movies then as well. But obviously now the influence is on the emphasis is on the big blockbuster films. But then you look at what's happening with Netflix and Amazon Prime and the independent film, world, and there are a lot of terrific films. They just might not be playing in everybody's local theater every week.
I think that's true. So let's talk about this HDNet thing that you're doing. Tell us about the association and what exactly you're doing, and hint, it's terrific. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Yes, I've been doing this for the last few years with HDNET Movies, and it's really fun because every year they come up with the titles. I work with them of films that have won Academy Awards. Some have won for Best Picture, some have won in other categories, as you know, Best Actor, or could be even a cinematography or something like that. And then for the whole month of February, we showcase these films on HDNET Movies, and it's really fun for me because I get to talk about every one of the films before showing it to everybody. So whether it's personal anecdotes I have about knowing somebody who was on the film, or just some behind-the-scenes things, or my experience watching the films myself, kind of the way we're doing it right now, in more of a conversational than a scripted way. So it's really fun for me not just to talk about these movies, but I also get to go back and watch some films that I haven't seen for a long time.
So fun. I do that a lot when I get myself into
right?
tizzy. I go back to those great old films, and I just have a great time with them. So let me ask you this. Are filmmakers too full of themselves these days? I mean, do they think that their roles are something different than, let's say, 91 years we've been doing this film thing? It's, oh my God. What's your thought?
Well, I think filmmakers might have been more full of themselves back in the studio days because they had even more power, whether it was studio chiefs or directors. And when you hear the stories about, somebody like Alfred Hitchcock, not exactly a sweetheart on the set, a genius, yes. So I think in some games, so look, some of the filmmakers today, we hear about them being tyrants or being too full of themselves and kind of subscribing to the whole auteur thing. But I think actually these days it's more collaborative than ever before, filmmaking. So with the exception of the very, very top tiers of directors, I think, today's filmmakers, they have to be a little bit more team players, and I think a little bit more inclusive in their filmmaking, because if not, they're not going to keep making movies.
Film industry is having its problems. We're going to kind of get into that a little bit, but I'm curious as to whether you think that the old way was better with the studio system rather than this indie, find your own money, have at it, do what you can do, pull it off, whatever. Which do you think is better, or would a combination of the two be a better way to go?
I think probably a combination. Look, I mean, the old studio system was certainly efficient. And if an actor signed a 7-year deal, they were going to make a lot of movies. On the other hand, they weren't going to get paid what they should have been paid, and they didn't always even have their choice of roles. So it was sort of like before baseball and the other sports had free agency. People could argue, well, the leagues ran better back in the day. Yeah, but it was, really all about ownership back then. And now it's a little bit more democratic. On the other hand, sometimes it takes just too long to get a movie made because, as you say, it's like, well, go ahead and try to raise the money. And I've talked to a lot of people who, made movies for a long time, and they're still having trouble raising funds. And, Clint Eastwood will tell you, and he's got a relationship with Warner Brothers that goes back 50 years, and yet he still has trouble getting movies made sometimes because they're like, well, I don't know if this is going to be commercial. Where is this going to play? What's the target audience? Let's do a bunch of test screenings, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, how about we make a movie?
Right, you would think.
Right.
But yeah, it's like they're shooting themselves in the foot in a way, which is very odd, I think.
Absolutely.
And it seems to be affecting some of the films that are getting made. So I ask you this next question, which is about politics. Is politics ruining filmmaking? And I mean politics that we're getting so political in our films, and we're going to talk about the current nominees, that, it's politics. If you're on the right side, you might be able to pull more money, or you might get some big guys interested if you play the right politics. I mean, or the opposite? What do you think's going on? I mean,
yeah, I do think sometimes, things get too political and, when people say, oh, most of Hollywood is liberal, in terms of the artistic community, yeah, in terms of, the people that control the money, maybe not. But I think most filmmakers are smart enough to realize you don't want to alienate half the audience, no matter which side you're on. So I think films that are too political, I mean, listen, a movie like Vice, they're telling us, hey, this is about politics, this is about politicians, we're going to have a very specific angle on it. That's fine, but I think if you try to inject your politics into commentary in your films, again, on either side, I think that's a mistake. And I think, again, most people don't want that. They don't want to go to the movies to get a political lecture, even if they agree with the politics they're seeing in the movie. First
of all, let me say this to you. We're going to do about the current, nominees, and every single one of them is political. It's a political story, whether you look at it in the face value or not. I mean, there's a black thing going on and there's an LGBTQT. They all have something that's, in the current zeitgeist of politics embedded in their films. I don't know if that works, but before we get into that, let me make you a little crazy. I want to ask you first if you think that the current nominees for Best Film are on par with films that have been nominated in the past. Then I'll tell you my opinion.
I think this year, the current nominees, I think there's a crop of a lot of very good films. I wouldn't say that there's a lot of greatness there. And yeah, you can go back again and look at some of the years where, and some of it was because there were only 5 nominees instead of 8, but there have been some years where all 5 were, movies that eventually were termed classics or, we considered to be classics. And it might not stack up an overall quality. I wouldn't say that. I mean, look, I think there's a couple of films that are nominated that I didn't even think were worth seeing, last year. So
you're going to tell me which they are?
Yeah, I'll tell you. Bohemian Rhapsody, I thought was, watered down, revisionist dreck about Freddie Mercury and his real life. And, I know a lot of people love that movie, and there's a real chance Rami Malek's going to win Best Actor, and, I think he's a terrific actor, and I think in the movie he's lip-syncing to someone else's music, and Bradley Cooper played a fictional singer, and I thought was a more realistic portrayal and actually performed the music. So for my money, Bohemian Rhapsody wasn't even one of the top 100 movies of last year, let alone top 8.
I agree. Totally agree.
I'm shocked. If someone had told me when I walked out of the screening room, last September or whenever it was, and said, "Well, you just saw a film that's going to be nominated for multiple Academy Awards," I would have said, "No, I saw Bohemian Rhapsody. What'd you think I saw?"
To me, they're all B movies. Like, you and I are about the same age. When we were coming of age, they would have been B movies. I mean, technically aren't they gorgeous and, costumes and
sure,
whatever. That's true. But the films themselves, what? How many times have we done that story? I mean, I'm sorry. It's just, that's one of the things that's annoying me about movies. I want to ask you this before we move on though, as well. And that is, there is something very crazy going on in film today, and it may be because we're of a generation different than the generation that they're selling tickets to now. I'm not sure. But I find it interesting that 2 of the films nominated this year, one represents the fabric of what film has been in the past, Roma, brilliantly done, I thought. But I lived in Latin America a long time, so I have my... I understand that world. And the other, Black Panther, appears to be, that technologically driven film of the future. And in that same conversation, can we talk about, are we sacrificing storyline and character for pyrotechnics? Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt about it. The Marvel Universe is all about the pyrotechnics. I mean, we see a lot of the same story over and over again. There's usually some sort of object, some sort of MacGuffin that everybody needs to get a hold of, or the world's going to come to an end, and then cue the battle sequences. For me, most of these superhero movies, it's astonishing to me that they're 2.5 hours long, and the story could be told in 95 minutes. And as you know, the movies are that long because they're not going to waste all that money on those scenes and then not put them up on the big screen. But I'm like, if Casablanca could be told in less than 2 hours, certainly Thor 7 could be told in less than 2.5 hours. So, there's no doubt about it that the special effects in some cases are the real stars of these movies.
And that's a generational thing. So then I have to ask you, so what happens to the small film with the story, with the character-driven plots? And, kids today, I got to tell you, they don't even read the classics in school anymore. They read the comic book version. That's what they're given. They have a new name for comic books, but that's it. Are you concerned about where this film thing goes because of what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not just where it's going, it's where it's gone and where it's going to stay. And yeah, unfortunately, look, as you know, the box office is driven by that first weekend, and the people that go to movies the first weekend are the young people. If you and I are going to go to the movies, we'll wait 2 weeks, and then we'll go see it on a Thursday afternoon when there's nobody else in the theater, so we can actually hear the movie and not worry about people talking or texting or anything like that. So to answer your question about where are the quality films going, I mean, they're already going. They're going into 8-part limited series that are on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon that are directed by top-tier directors and feature A-list actors, but they're just not movies per se. They're 6 or 7 or 8 45-minute long movies or original films. But when I look at something like Sharp Objects or The True Detectives, those types of things, those are movie quality. In some cases, a lot better than the movies we're seeing, and that's why these top actors are drawn to that material.
How true is that? It's kind of sad in a way, too, though. I mean, it's good and it's bad. It's like because it's like the golden age of TV has come back, but we're sacrificing something in it all. That's crazy. Now, listen to me. This is where I wanted to go with you. I want to talk about a film that isn't nominated for an Academy Award. And I happen to know you didn't like this film, so we're going to have a conversation about Crazy Rich Asians. So let me say what I want.
I actually did like it. So for the record, I did like it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but you're tough on it. Let me just say this: yay, romantic comedy. Yay, cute. Yay, yay, yay. All right. I'm like, finally, back to pure entertainment. Pretty well done, yeah. Right? When Harry Met Sally, A Pretty Woman, as Something's Got to Give, It Happened One Night, Sabrina won, My Man Godfrey, Tracy and Hepburn. Have we become snobs about comedy? Because comedy doesn't get any respect.
Well, I mean, even historically, as you know, it really hasn't gotten a lot of respect. You could say, Annie Hall's probably the last comedy that really got honored at the Oscars, and that was, more than 40 years ago. Listen, with Crazy Rich Asians, again, as we talked about, movie setting out to do what it wanted to do, and it wanted to be this, gorgeous, glossy, lovely melodrama, typical soap opera, and as such, did it beautifully, and that's why that movie did real well. That's the other thing. I think these films do well if they would just give, just put them out there and give audiences a chance to see them. I think people flock to Crazy Rich Asians for a lot of reasons. Yeah, for one thing, it was, it's shocking, but it's been so long since we had an all-Asian, cast in a big movie. But also because it was such a relatable story. Everybody can relate to the scary mother-in-law prospect and the scheming friend and the star-crossed romance. It's classic stuff.
So what's the trouble here? And we talked about, Richard, whether movies influence, society or society influences movies. But somewhere in the middle, there could be something. There's just, everything is so radicalized and so dark and so, I'm exhausted before they even start. And that's where I want to go next, by the way. So maybe I'll just skip ahead and say to you, when I look at the nominees this year, I was exhausted before I was bored. I was exhausted. I was like, oh, come on, guys, and did the Academy get it right? Let me hear in the Bohemian Rhapsody, The Favorite, Black Panther, Black Klansman, Green Book, Vice, A Star Is Born, Roma. Did the Academy get, in your opinion, it right as to who they nominated?
Well, it's hard to say if they got it right or wrong. Well, they got it wrong with Bohemian Rhapsody, so I will say that. But I think, if memory serves, I recommended all of the other films at various degrees of enthusiasm. So I can't say they got it wrong. They also, they can only pick from the films that are out there. And as we've talked about, there were a lot of strong films last year, but not films that, you would instantly say are classics. And, as far as the films being, darker, yeah, I think it kind of, sometimes it does reflect society. We're living in a very cynical time, and a lot of people are very down about whatever is happening in their lives, or certainly what they're seeing on their cable news channel every day, where it's negative, negative, negative. Whether it's negative on one side or, again, it's negative on the other side. It's not celebrating the values that we have or you have. It's denigrating the opinions of others. And yeah, I think you do see that sometimes reflected in films as well.
So I brought up before about films being two African-American films, one about politics, one about brown issues, and the gazillion remake of A Star Is Born. This is what I'm talking about politics and putting itself into film. Stories. Where are the stories? Really, you can go back and do A Star Is Born 50,000 times, and as bad as it may get, it's still a story that, is still remains with time, is good with time. What's the way I want to put that? But I'm worried about that. I'm worried about the films that are being done because it does have, The Favorite. Look, that was a beautiful film. There was some fun acting in that. But I'm going, so what was this about? What was the point? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I do, but I could, I would argue that you could go back and look at any era of film and you could make some of those same arguments. I mean, you look at something like Titanic, one of the most successful movies of all time, huge, mainstream entertainment, swept the Oscars, and it's beautiful escapist romance. But, there's all kinds of political statements in that movie. There's all kinds of statements about class warfare and elitism and heroism. So almost any film, Gone with the Wind, for God's sake, you could look at almost any big mainstream piece of entertainment, and there's probably going to be some injection of politics or societal commentary as well. I think that's the nature of storytelling. So I don't know necessarily that we're that much different than we were in previous eras in that respect.
Here's where I would differ with you. I would say that they were still character driven. They were still wonderfully fleshed out characters that you cared about, but, in Titanic or in any of the films that you do. And, do you really care about a lot of these people who, are in these other films that we've got today so much as the story is what's important. Oddly, even in Roma, right? It's so interesting to me. I just thought that was a gorgeous film. Just beautifully and wonderfully shot. And I can see where it would bore the tears off of some people too. But,
sure.
Okay. But the only, out of all of this, I thought Green Book was the old, was Driving Miss Daisy, Redux. Not quite as well done, by the way, although I think Viggo did a great performance. But again, that's like the character driven is not where we are. And I think that that's an issue. So we walk out and maybe that's where Crazy Rich Asians came in, because it was character driven. Whether you liked the mother or you didn't, or you liked her or you liked, see what I'm saying? That seems to me to be a problem in film today. Whatever. Who am I? You're the critic. I'm just telling you what.
I think it's a movie to movie thing. I mean, I would agree in terms of like the superhero movies. One of the reasons why I prefer Iron Man, the first couple of Iron Man movies over most of them, is because it was really more about Tony Stark and not Iron Man. And we really did get to know about Tony Stark. And that's why I think, the Dark Knight movies did so well and were, elevated art as opposed to most comic book movies, because Christopher Nolan knows how to tell a story. He's a writer himself. Right. And, as always, the Bruce Wayne character is more interesting than Batman. Batman's just a scowling guy, in a cape, beating up the bad guys. It's the alter ego, if you will, the real personalities. So those are the few, in superhero movies that have a little bit more character, emphasis.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And again, that's an old story, right? So that's why it was so well written. You have to do that. What about stars today? My issue here would be we don't have very many stars. And who we call a star on Tuesday may not be a star on Friday. They don't look the role of the stars that you and I had growing up. And that was the studio that was all phony and baloney and whatever, but great PR people back in the day. We only have a handful that have endured. You have thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think it's exactly what you said. That as we know now, reading all the the biographies and the stories, we know that yesterday's generations and all generations of movie stars were in many cases extremely flawed and not necessarily even likable people, but the studios protected them, and the publicists made sure the stories didn't get into the tabloids, and they were able to have that illusion in most cases. We didn't really know Cary Grant. We really didn't know Bing Crosby or Ingrid Bergman, other than, occasionally there'd be a sensational headline about a marriage or something like that. Whereas, today's society is all about even almost the biggest stars inviting us into their living rooms, and they're going to Snapchat, and they're going to Instagram and do all that, so that, which makes them shrink and makes them more human. Now, some people might say, well, that's good. We shouldn't be putting them on a pedestal. But it takes away the whole star persona. And I remember even Jack Nicholson years ago telling some young actors, don't go on. What are you doing? Why are you going on every one of these talk shows? And what are you doing going on Hollywood Squares and all that stuff? You're taking away the whole aura, the whole mystique of becoming a movie star. And Nicholson's argument, too, was that it just made it harder for them to give believable performances when we're thinking about their personal lives all the time while watching them on the big screen. I think he had a great point. I
think so, too. Very quickly, the cost of going to see a movie. I mean, $25 in some cities, $10 just to get in before the popcorn, just for yourself. If you have a date, you're up, Who's Creek. What about that?
Yeah, it's much too expensive. And, I'd say in some cases, at least with the tickets, you can go to matinees or you can get some bargains once in a while or join, various movie-going clubs and get some deals. But all the other things you talk about, especially, where I'm at, Chicago, if you want to park in a garage at the movie theater, wow, it's the budget of a small film. And the concessions, and God love the concessionaires. I know that drives a lot of the business and everything, but I got a bottle of water at the movies the other day. A bottle of water was almost $7.
Get out of here.
I'm not kidding you.
Really?
No, just one. Just one bottle of water. It was $6.80 for a bottle of water. So I completely understand why when I go to evening screenings, I see a lot of the people around me taking things out of their purses and pockets and bags because they brought in their own stuff, because you can easily spend $30 at the concession stand just on your popcorn and a pop and some Junior Mints, and that's ridiculous. That's insane.
I think so, too, and I think it's hurting the hell out of film, and they need to fix that, and I don't know how they do it. And, it was a sense of community to go to a movie, right? We don't have that. We're completely, oh, my God, married to the Internet. So we talked about the magic kind of sort of going out of all of this, because that's what's been going on in a way. But we can bring it back. Because if you watch HDNET Movie Series with Richard Roeper this month, where he goes into some wonderful films that you take a look at, right? I think Platoon is on that list. No Country for Old Men is on that list. Schindler's List, Gandhi. You having a lot of fun with this?
Yeah, great films. You mentioned some of the best, and some like it hot, and even we talked about comedies, even City Slickers, because of course Jack Palance won for Best Supporting Actor. So if there was any kind of an Oscar connection, that was good enough for us to include it on the list. And it is a lot of fun to talk about these movies. And I think it's kind of cool that we know that some of the people watching these films probably have never seen them before, and you can never duplicate the first time seeing a film. So I always envy somebody that has yet to see a film like Marty, where Ernest Borgnine won the Academy Award, or Reversal of Fortune with Jeremy Irons, who was Best Actor. And that's one of the fun things about this month-long series of films.
Hooray for Richard Roeper. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you so much. It was great talking with you.
I've been speaking with Richard Roeper. For more than 3 decades, the leading film critic and a columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times, and host of HDNET Movies' 3rd annual movie event, and the Oscar Goes To. For more information, visit hdnetmovies.com. You are listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern at hallicasserjayne.com, and is available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Be sure to find me on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and Overcast, on all your favorite apps. You can find the Halli Casser-Jayne Show on your Alexa device, too. Just say the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Oh, and come play with me on Twitter at the Halli CJ Show. Charles Matthau was weaned on film. His father was Academy Award-winning actor and comedian Walter Matthau, best known for his role as Oscar Madison in The Odd Couple. Charles began acting when he was just a kid, before at the ripe young age of 24, he turned to directing with The Grass Harp from a novella by Truman Capote, and the made-for-TV movie The Marriage Fool. A graduate of the film school at the University of Southern California, Matthau also has directed Doin' Time on Planet Earth, Her Minor Thing, Baby-O, and Freaky Deaky starring Christian Slater. His latest film is The Book of Leah, starring Armand Assante, currently in post-production. Let's catch up with actor, writer, producer, director, one of the most delightful people I know, Charles Matthau. So, Charlie, y'all going to come in, because Charlie and I off air, we're always giggling and laughing and having a really good time. And I said to him just before we started this bit, let's get serious, but I don't think that's going to last for a whole long time, Charlie Matthau. Do you? Not you and I. Oh, my goodness. It never does. But so listen, Mr. Charles, I have a secret to tell you.
You do?
I do.
Oh, boy.
Are you listening to the secret?
I am.
I got to see your new film, The Book of Leah, the director's cut. I did. It was snuck to me. Did you know that I had seen it? No, you didn't know, but now you do. Isn't that incredible? Don't you want to hear what I have to say about it?
It's incredible as long as you like it.
I didn't like it. I loved it.
Oh.
I would tell you, if you know me, I'm a pretty honest lady, I'd say, I like it. I loved it. This movie has got to get its, out to the public. Oh, please. Can I just tell you, this is why I love it. It's a great idea. It's a great script. It's got a twist to it that we haven't seen before. All of that. Okay, fine. But you pull a performance out of two people in that. Everybody is wonderful in it. So I don't want to just say whatever, but I was so moved by Armando Sante, who, by the way, stars in the film, folks, and is still as sexy as he ever was. But he gives a performance in this that I think is Academy Award nominee kind of performance. How do you like that? And you got that out of him. God bless you. The other, right?
It's not hard to do with him.
No, I don't agree with that because, it's brilliant. The other moment in the film that just absolutely tickled me to death, and we're going to have him on the show in a month, is Freddie Cole. And one of my favorite jazz guys ever. But that moment in that film with him at that piano, Jesus, Charlie, gorgeous. So I'm tickling everybody's ivories to go see this film when it comes out, and hopefully it'll be finished soon, yes?
I hope so. We've got a wonderful producer that I know you know and are friends with, Leslie, and she wrote the movie and did a brilliant job, and she is in the process of figuring out how we complete this sucker.
Well, it's going to get done because I know Leslie. And I know when she decides she's going to do something, she's going to do it. But I want everybody to keep... She's a dynamo. She is a dynamo. That's why we're friends. That's why we're all friends, this whole crew. But here's the deal. This is a good film. So good for you. I'm thrilled for you because I think this is I can't wait for the public to get a look at this. But I digress. And we now have to get to why we're here. I think it's about 10 years you and I have been doing our annual Academy Award show. It's like, huh? Have I known Charlie that long? I know. It's scary, right?
Yeah, the time goes by so fast.
Doesn't it? And I can remember how scared I was the first time I did the interview with you and the Lemon Boy. I mean, I was like, oh God, oh well, here we are. Now we're friends, and it's cute. We've progressed, but we're here to talk about film and Academy Awards, and let's talk about it. So let's start with this. What do you first of all think about the quality of films nominated this year?
I think it was a good year. There were some really memorable films. I mean, Roma, Green Book, The Favorite. I mean, there's a lot of good ones. A lot of good stuff.
Do you think it holds up to
Vice?
Which one? Vice. Yeah, Vice.
Vice. I love that.
Yeah. Did you think that it stands up to where we've been in the last, let's say, few years? Where were you on that? I mean, and I know like you don't like to ever commit to good pay. You just see everything through rose-colored glasses. But I am curious about this because I have a theory about this year's films. But go ahead.
I would call it an above average year.
Okay.
But what do you think?
I didn't think it was above average year. No, I really didn't. I was disappointed, but I'll say that much and I'll tease the audience because I think we can get back to that in a little bit. Here's where something came up to me. I was sent an email just before we went on air from a friend who said, did you see what Barry Diller said in the last 24 hours about Hollywood? And I'm going to quote him now. He said, Hollywood is now irrelevant. Is it, Charlie?
I know he's made some quotes like that, like being in the movie business is like being in the horse and buggy business and stuff like that. And I know what he means in some ways, but no, I mean I don't think it's irrelevant. I mean, I think movies have still a big impact on society and are a reflection of society, but it's more spread out now. Now you have Netflix and Amazon. People are binge watching, and it's not. I don't think that a movie being released has the kind of focus it did any more than when there were 3 or 4 networks, and it was Sunday night, and that was a show would come on and be watched by a third of the people in America, and you don't have that anymore either. So it's more decentralized, but I still think that media itself has a lot of impact.
Yeah, I do think that media has a lot of impact. It concerns me, this just decentralization, because do the best films get seen by the most people, or do they get lost? There's one thing that's often said to me is in the old days, good stuff came from the top down. It was handpicked for you in a way. And you got to know what the best films were going to be. You got to know what the best music was going to be. The decks were cleared of the trash before it got to you. And now you got to go through a whole lot of stuff because it's coming from the bottom up. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because there's so many films that we just don't see that probably, are just stupendous, like your film. Hopefully we'll get it distributed and everybody will get to see it, but you don't know. And that's one of the problems with filmdom these days, I think. And I don't know that that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm trying to figure it out. I do know this, though, and I'm curious of what you think, and that is, despite what Barry Diller says, and, TV and their film, their TV, you brought it up, but projects like Mrs. Maisel or Big Little Lies or The Affair or An Outlander or The Handmaid's Tale, is film producing material stuff as good as that? Or is it because they're, it's like Charles Dickens wrote great novels, but he did it in sequence and in sequels and, one chapter at a time. Any thought there?
I think there's a lot of good work being done both places, but in television you have a lot of opportunity to tell stories that are not geared, with these subscription services like Amazon and Netflix and HBO and so forth. You're able to tell stories that don't have to be told necessarily in 90 minutes, and you're also able to deal with material that's not necessarily, it's so expensive today to open a studio movie. It's so that it is as expensive to release a movie about a comic book character as it is, a relationship drama about real people. So you have less and less of the latter, and the studios are all trying for tent poles where you can have sequels and, based on some kind of intellectual property that everybody knows, like a famous comic book character, something like that. And it's also, as it's always been, appealed to a young demographic. So, but you just have less and less feature films being made, and you have fewer ones, more expensive ones, and they cost a fortune to market. Getting stuff that's geared toward the lowest common denominator because it's so expensive, especially on the marketing part.
Is that where the big problem is, on the marketing edge? I mean, I don't have any clue as to what it costs to make a good, wonderful independent film itself, but in that cost is the marketing budget, and that's what you're saying is killing people because the studios aren't doing it for you. Is that it?
No, well, I think what I'm saying is, for a studio to market a film or anybody to market a film, it's very, very expensive. And the way the distribution patterns are today, you have to release a movie that opens big, as opposed to in the 70s, you could start a movie in LA and New York and start at a couple of theaters and build word of mouth, and eventually it would find an audience. So whereas today it has to open big, so it has to be something that has a lot of people aware of, it has to have a big awareness.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a huge amount of advertising cost. So, you tend to get less films. Films that are made are usually very expensive. The irony is it's cost less to actually make a film than ever. In the sense, that's more democratic, but as far as getting it released, that's
the killer.
Less democratic.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you can release it on the internet, but if you want to have something that's really seen by a lot of people, the control of that is really in the hands of a few big corporations.
Yeah, and that's kind of sad, isn't it? And even as you have, like you said, it's so to film it itself today is so much easier, digitally and what have you. It's kind of sad because I think a lot of great films are getting missed, and a lot of stuff I'd rather not see is filtering to the top. And there's a style. We'll talk about that in a second too. When your dad was at the top of his game, the great Walter Matthau, comedy was a pretty well-respected art. I mean, Hollywood's never been kind to comedy in terms of the Academy. I think there are a handful of great comedic films that have won, or comedy films that have won, the Academy Award. But there have been those. So before I go into my shtick on this year's films, right, I want to say to you that I loved a film, Crazy Rich Asians. Did you see it?
Yes. I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. Right?
And it was like a kind of in an odd sort of way. It was like a throwback to a Doris Day, Rock Hudson kind of thing. In a way, the graphic that they used reminded me of those films. You remember the beginning of Pillow Talk or whatever. But it was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful little not little film, big film, but what it had was some extraordinary performances. Awkwafina, the one who plays the girlfriend, the girl stole every scene she was in, and she's on to big things. Michelle Yeoh, who played the mother, remarkable. This new star, Henry Golding, an Asian who's going to go to the top of the moon. This guy has got sex and he knows how to act and he's adorable, whatever. But just completely ignored by the Academy. And yet it was one of the few films that I didn't walk away going, oh, I'm exhausted. Because almost every other film that was nominated was just psychologically and emotionally exhausting. It's like, lighten up. I'm curious on your thoughts about that. Woody Allen, Nancy Meyers, there aren't many people making these great films. And, comedy is hard as hell to do. Nobody knows that better than you. It's probably much harder than the straight drama. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's the hardest because you know right away if you succeed or not because people are either laughing or they're not laughing, whereas the drama is more of a gray area. I think there were some films this year, though, that were, had some humor in it and got some recognition. Like, for instance, I liked Vice. Did you see Vice?
I did see Vice.
You didn't care for it?
Something happened while I was watching it. So I'll tell you what happened, which is it was about 45 minutes in, okay? And I thought it was over. There was a cut. There was an odd cut. And I went, what the hell? And then I realized it wasn't. And I thought the editing on it was peculiar. And I was not thrilled, to be honest with you, with what's his name's performance. It annoyed me.
Really?
Yeah, I know. I thought he was working too hard. I didn't buy it. So, but yeah, so that was my take on Vice. I liked the concept of it. I thought it, whatever. And I have it on my list to go back. I'll go back and I'm going to watch it again because everybody loved it and I didn't. And I said, maybe I got it on a bad day.
I think it's worth a second look. I think what you're referring to is they do the credits in the middle of the film as if the film ended
right
when Dick Cheney had just been, been a successful cabinet official and he had been a successful CEO. And what would his life have been like how would he be viewed had he never become vice president? And so they sort of end the movie before that to make that point, which I thought was different and kind of interesting, but I could see where it could also irritate some people.
Yeah, it threw me off completely, totally, 100%. And like I said, and I thought that Bale's performance was it had to be contained because of the choices that he made as to how he was going to, express himself as Cheney. So it bothered me. Well, we're talking about that. Let's go to this year's. Let me go to one other subject before we go to really the get into the meat of who you and I think are, play our parlor game. Who's going to do what? And that's these blockbusters that are coming out. You mentioned it a little bit, but I was thinking back in the 1950s. Do you remember all those gladiator films that came out of that? The Ben-Hur, and think of the actors, the Victor Matures and the George Reeves and the Jeff Chandlers and the Steve Reeds. Bigger Than Life was in vogue back in the 50s. I think these technical, pyrotechnic movies that they're making now, if you want to call them that, really are the 21st century's versions of what was going on in the 50s. And I'm almost thinking the film in a way is trying to go back to the 1950s. Am I off the wall? It wouldn't be the first time.
No, I think there's something to be said to it. I think that comic book movies are often mythological in nature, as were some of those movies from the 50s, taken from Greek and Roman mythology. And I think comic books are, in a way, are sort of a modern day mythology. So I think that's a very good point.
And I think it's interesting because I think, Richard Roeper and I talked about this too, about whether films reflect politics or the politics are reflected in films and, which came first, the chicken or the egg. You can get into that. But I do think there's a certain kind of trauma going on in society right now. We'll try and stay out of the politics for this interview. But there's a certain amount of trauma that's going on in American society right now. And I think it's starting to show up in films. And so these blockbusters are, as they were in the 50s, which was a period right after the war and, and the Red Scare and people were freaked out. Remember? It was before our time. But you know that I'm talking about. So I'm saying that that's what I think in a way maybe, percolating below the surface in Hollywood right now, in filmmaking right now. I just thought I'd throw that out for whatever it was worth. It was an observation. I think it's a fair one. Let's go back to this year's nominees. I want to talk about Best Supporting Actor because I thought this was a weird one. Adam Driver for BlacKkKlansman, Mahershala Ali for Green Book, Sam Rockwell Vice, Sam Elliott, A Star Is Born, Richard Grant, Can You Ever Forgive Me? I'll ask you first who you think gets it, or who you want to get it.
I think Mr. Ali is going to get it for Green Book, and even though he just won 2 years ago, I think he deserves it. I mean, listen, it's hard to say when you're comparing performances because, like my father used to say, if it was a real competition, you'd have 5 actors playing the same role.
Sure.
So it's, in a way, it's really more of a popularity contest, but I thought he was fantastic in Green Book. He's a great actor. I really enjoy him in the True Detective series that's on TV right now.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
I have, and I think he was wonderful in that. I didn't like him in Green Book. Oh my God, we're differing on opinions this year.
Well, that's good. That makes it interesting. You didn't like his performance?
I thought from the second half of the film on, yes, he came alive. I thought before he, came out of the closet and all of that, I thought he was too similar to the way Christian Bale. I mean, they were both wrapped in a bad choice, a negative choice of how they were going to play the introvert, if you will. And, you got to be careful about that because if you make a choice, you can't get out of the role itself. And that's why I didn't like it. And once he got past the truth, then I thought he was 3-dimensional, but before that I thought he was 1-dimensional. And so I was really disappointed in his performance up until the middle of the film. So yeah, that was my thought on him. Sam Elliott, who I happen to have known in my Hollywood days, who is a really interesting character. Charlie, if you ever met him, he's interesting.
Did you date him? Did you date Sam Elliott?
No, we just had a lot of the same friends, so we were always at the same parties, and we got to be friends. And
you should have dated him.
He wasn't my type. He's very good looking, but not my type. Not my type at all. But darling. But he is who he is on screen, and when you can do that, and when you can, John Wayne could do that too. When you can put yourself on screen, it's always remarkable because it's so pure, it's so true, it's so real, and that's why he's so fantastic. And he did it in A Star Is Born. I thought it was interesting. Bradley Cooper was on Jimmy Kimmel maybe a couple of nights ago, or one of them, I forget which. I always forget. And he who was it? What's the other one? It wasn't NBC. It was maybe it was Colbert. And he said, "Can you get back into the role that you played?" And as an actor, he was like, "Wait a minute, I let that go. The show is over. I'm not doing that role anymore." But he made mention of the fact that in a way he built the role around Sam Elliott's voice, and he was able to conjure up the character, which was really, really interesting. Sam Elliott, though, he's quietly been in an enormous amount of films and, been pivotal to so many films. I'd like to see him win it, but okay, that's my thought. Anything else?
No, I mean, there's something to be said for it. It's like I said before, it's really a popularity contest. So it's fine I think it's fine to give somebody an award for also their body of work with that in consideration. And Sam Elliott has been in several movies where he could have gotten an Oscar, and he's long overdue. And if he were to win, I would think that would be great, but he's not going to. I think. No. I think Mr. Lee got it pretty well locked up.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that's the way that it works, but I'd still like to see him do it. Best Supporting Actress nominees: Emma Stone, The Favorite; Regina King, If Beale Street Could Talk; Rachel Weisz, The Favorite; Marina de Tavira, Roma; Amy Adams, Vice. I'll let you go first again. That's a hard one, I think, this one.
Yeah, it's a hard one. I would have to say, I think I'll go for a surprise. I think Regina King's going to win.
Actually, I'm with you. We agree.
Really?
We agree. We absolutely agree.
And if she doesn't, I think then it would be Amy Adams. But I would say I would I think Regina King is going to pull it off.
Yeah, I'd like to see that too. As a matter of fact, the Marina de Tavira from Roma, and we'll talk about Roma in a second. Because it was a foreign language film, so to speak, with subtitles, and I just thought she was brilliant in that. Just, wow, like wow. But she's not Hollywood. She's not Hollywood look. She's not Hollywood's, and she, will she ever get another role? I mean, interesting performance, but Roma was quite a film. All right, so let's look at Best Actor. Bradley Cooper, A Star Is Born, William Dafoe, at Eternity's Gate, Rami Malek, Bohemian Rhapsody, Viggo Mortensen, Green Book, and Christian Bale, Vice. So you know who I'm not voting for. Who are you going to vote for? Who did you vote for? You vote. I forgot. You get to vote.
Well, I would say that Rami Malek's going to win for Bohemian Rhapsody, and you can't disagree with that. He was fantastic. Viggo was fantastic. William Dafoe could win every year, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Bradley Cooper was terrific. Christian Bale. We disagree on that one. I liked him as Dick Cheney. I mean, when I first heard Christian Bale is going to play Dick Cheney, I thought it was,
no way.
I was reading a typo or something. It's crazy, but he really pulled it off. But I think Rami's going to win.
I think Rami's going to win because it's popular and because of the subject matter. I was dismayed by that whole film. I didn't like the film, and I didn't like his performance. I got waylaid by some stuff in that, and his looks and everything. Viggo Mortensen, I got to tell you, blew me away. Who knew? I think of him as the pretty boy. You remember him as the pretty boy? And to see him pulled, I was shocked. I was shocked by his performance. Absolutely shocked. Happily, brilliantly shocked by it.
I saw him, though. He did a movie where he played a Russian gangster a few years ago, and that was not totally unlike the Italian gangster that he plays in this. And so I wasn't shocked by it, but he could do anything. He's one of the best actors in America.
I agree with you, and I'd like to see them give him more, stuff, because in a way he reminds me of Italian, New York. Al
Pacino?
No, the other one.
Robert De Niro?
Yeah, Robert De Niro. There's a certain Robert De Niro quality to him that he pulls off. And I've been thinking about it because, De Niro, I don't know, De Niro does something where you almost get the feeling that at the same time he's talking to the audience as the character, he's also looking at himself as the character. I think that's what his genius is, if you can figure that out, what I'm just saying, because I know it sounds weird. And I got that same sense with Mortensen, that he's fully realized at all time that he's on film. That's hard to do, as you know, as a director, to get an actor to stay, that present. He blew me away.
Well, there's definitely similarities. I don't think that Viggo would mind at all being compared to Robert De Niro.
for sure. Absolutely. It's just a surprise to me. That's all. Just a surprise. Okay. Best Actress nominees: Lady Gaga for A Star Is Born, Olivia Colman, The Favorite, Glenn Close, The Wife, Melissa McCarthy, Can You Ever Forgive Me, Yalitza Aparicio for Roma.
Based on who's won all season long, it's going to be Glenn Close for The Wife. Somebody that's not going to win that would be great if she did would be Melissa McCarthy. I thought she was fantastic. And Can You Ever Forgive Me? I don't know. I mean, they were all outstanding. But if somebody's in a pool, they need to vote for Glenn Close because she's going to win.
Yeah, I actually don't think it was her best performance, but I think it was a great performance. And it was startling, that she pulled that off. I thought Olivia Colman was hilarious. Just, again, it's too comedic, so she may not get it. Why she wouldn't, it goes back to what I said about how we treat humor-filled roles. But Melissa McCarthy, this is a woman who knows what she's doing. She knows how to act, right?
She is a treasure.
Right? It's just, fascinating. All right, nominees: Best Picture as we move along here: Bohemian Rhapsody, Vice, A Star Is Born, The Favorite, Black Klansman, Green Book, Black Panther, and Roma. But first question, are there any films that you saw that you think should have been on the list that didn't make it?
Oh, absolutely. I thought the best film this year was, and it was hardly seen by anybody, was Eighth Grade. And I saw that it won the Writers Guild Award for Best Film, and I was delighted and surprised to see that. I didn't even know it had been nominated by the Writers Guild, but to me, that was the best movie of the year.
Oh, I haven't seen it. Oh, my goodness. I have
sensational. But, a popular movie and a good movie are two different things, and once in a while they intersect. And so that would have been my choice this year.
Okay. But in light of that, out of the ones that are nominated, who do you give it to? Who do you think? Who'd you vote for? Which one?
I think Roma's going to win, and it absolutely deserves it. If it doesn't, the winner will be Green Book. But I'm highly confident that Roma is going to win Best Picture.
I think that film is beautiful. That's all. Just gorgeous in every way, shape, and form. It's a European kind of film, though, right? I wonder how most of America receives it.
Most of America would find it too slow. They wouldn't give it. They wouldn't be patient enough to allow it to cast its spell over them.
And that's it. It's just spellbinding. Gorgeous film. Gorgeous piece of work. That man is amazing, and he did it all, right, except for act. I mean, he did.
I think he did the catering. Yeah. I think he did everything. He was the editor. He was the cameraman. He wrote it. He directed it.
So I didn't do Best Director, darling. So I'm going to ask my friend, who I think is one of our great directors. Who do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Ran for Roma.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Christ, everybody go see this film. That's all. You just must see this film because it's a once in a lifetime that something that brilliant and that beautiful comes up. One of my problems with it with film this year, all of it was so steeped, Charlie, in politics in one form or another. The films, it was a black issue, it was an LGBTQ thing, it was segregation, it was drug abuse, it was poverty. I'm starting to get exhausted from all of this. That's all I have to tell you. I want film to get back to great characters, a Helen Keller, a Scout Finch. I want to go home to that. I think we could all use a little of that. Any thoughts on that?
There's room for all kinds of films. Absolutely. I mean, I like political films, but I also love the kind of films that you're talking about. And I also love escapist films, and I also love comedies. And comedies are absolutely ignored by the Academy. I mean, trying to think of films that are really comedies that have won Best Picture, and other than Annie Hall,
right?
I mean, to me, Shakespeare in Love, that won, but that wasn't comedy. I mean, that wasn't really a laugh out loud comedy. I don't think so. There've been a couple like that, but Annie Hall's really the one that stands out in my mind. And it's like Cary Grant never won an Oscar, and what a great actor he was. But he specialized in light comedy, which is maybe the hardest to do. A lot of actors say, and not everybody could do it, but very unappreciated and unrecognized by the Academy. And
I wonder, does Hollywood lack a sense of humor?
Absolutely. Oh my God, the pomposity of the over seriousness. I mean, just listen to the speeches that you have to endure. When you watch that program, it's missing a lot of humor, and it takes itself much too seriously.
Yeah, and I think that has to change. First of all, I think the whole country has to change and lighten up. We just need to lighten up over here. It's just, I just spent all that time overseas, and I came back and I went, oh my God, do we need to lighten up in America? We are freaked out over here. It's just, tough to understand. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see, us, bring back some comedy. I mean, Nancy Meyer's, Something's Gotta Give was a great film, and that she got her due, what's her name, who played the role, but this is a woman with another body of work, a good, great comedy, kind of like what you saw in the 30s and 40s. She's got that capability, and I guess they've run Woody Allen out of town now, right? So Yeah, Hollywood lighten up. I asked Richard Roeper earlier, has the magic gone out of film, the fun, the romance? Can this industry be saved? Does it need to be saved, Charlie, or do you think it's doing fine? And or what would you like to see happen here in Hollywood?
Well,
look how serious I am this year. I'm talking about lightening up, by the way, and I'm like totally serious. Oh God, I'm sorry.
No, it's doing fine financially, but I certainly think it needs to lighten up, and I think there's an overemphasis today on political correctness, and in a way, it really starts to impede with free speech. I mean, I'm certainly against anything that really is offensive to people. But I mean, there's got to be a sense of humor also about things, not take everything so super serious. I remember, and this was going on back in the day also. I remember when I went with my folks to the Oscars one year, and Vanessa Redgrave got up and she made a speech about how wonderful the PLO is. Then the next person that went on stage was Patty Chayefsky. And he said, Vanessa Redgrave winning the Oscar is not a pivotal moment in history. And the whole place erupted in applause and laughter.
Right.
And so I would say lighten up would be the two key words.
Yeah, I'm with you, buddy. I'm with you. Oh, boy. Another year gone by. We'll see how well we did this year on picking the winners. Charlie, it's always delicious to talk with you. Always, always, always.
Thank you for having me. It was always great to talk to you, and a lot of fun.
Hooray for Charles Matthau. That's all I have to say. See you next year. I've been speaking with motion picture director Charles Matthau. For more information on his new film, The Book of Leah, and his other work, visit Matthau.com. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show is a production of Resec, LLC. Be sure to tune in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show at hallicasserjayne.com or listen on your favorite app. New podcasts are posted Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern.